NixonCheckers speech, also known as defense speech, broadcasted on NBC News, funded by the RNC, the Republican National Committee. Presented to you on September 23rd of 1952 by Richard Nixon, currently the 36th Vice President of the United States of America and going to be the 37th President of the United States of America. Recorded at Los Angeles, California, USA. My fellow Americans, I come before you as a candidate of the vice presidency and as a man whose honesty and integrity has been questioned. Now, the usual political thing to do when charges have been made against you is to either ignore them or to deny them, but giving no details. I believe we've had enough of that in the United States, particularly with the present administration in Washington, D.C. To me, the office of vice presidency is a great one. And I feel that people have got to have confidence in the integrity of the man who run for it and those who might obtain it. I have a theory, too, that the best and only answer to those of a smear and honest misunderstanding of the facts is to tell the truth. And that's why I'm here tonight. I want to tell you my side of the case. I'm sure that you've read the charge and you've heard about it. That I, Senator Nixon, took $18,000 from a group of my fellow supporters. Now, was that wrong? And let me say it was wrong. I'm saying, incidentally, that was wrong. Not just illegal, as it is not a matter of it's legal or illegal. That's not enough. The question is, was it morally wrong? I say that it was morally wrong if any of those $18,000 had been used for my own personal use. I say that it was morally wrong if it was secretly given and secretly used. I say it was morally wrong if any of the contributors got special flavors for the contributions that they made. And now to answer the question that led me to say this. No, 1 cent of that $18,000 has, or any other type of money, has ever been used for my personal gain. Every penny of it was used to pay for political expenses that I don't think should be charged for the taxpayers of the United States. It is not a secret fund. As a matter of fact, when I was on Meet the Press, some of you have seen it last Sunday, Peter Edson came up to me after the program. Some said, "Dick, what about this fund what we hear about?" And I said, well, there's no secret about it. Go out and see Donna Smith, who is the administrator of the fund. And I gave him, Edson, his, Smith's, address. And I said that you'll find the purpose of the fund simply was to defray political expenses that I do not feel should be charged to the government. And third, let me point this out. And I want to make this very clear. That no contributor to this fund, no contributor to any of my campaigns has ever received any contributions, consideration that he would not have received an ordinary consultant. I just don't believe that. And I can say that never will I have been in the Senate of the United States. As far as the people that contributed to this fund is concerned, I have made a telephone call for them to an agency. Or have I gone down to an agency in their behalf, and their records will show that the records which are in the hands of the administration. Well then, some of you say, rightly, well, what did you use this fund for, Senator? What did you have it? Let me just tell you a word how a Senate office operates. First of all, a Senate gets $50,000 a year in a salary. He gets enough money to pay for one trip a year, round trip, that is, for himself and his family between home and Washington, D.C. And then he gets an allowance to handle the people that work in his office, to handle his mail. And the allowance for my state of California is enough to hire 13 people. And let me say incidentally that the allowance is not enough to pay the senator. It's paid directly to the individuals that the senator puts on his payroll. But all of these people and all of these allowances are strictly official business. Business, for example, when a consultant writes in and wants you to go down to the Veterans Administration and get some information about his GI policy. Items of that type, for example. But there are other expenses which are not covered by the government. And I think I can best discuss these expenses by asking you some questions. Do you think that when I or any other senator makes a political speech, has it printed, should charge the printing of that speech, and mailing of that speech to the taxpayers? Do you think, for example, when I and any other senator makes a trip to his home state to make a purely political speech, that the cost of this trip to his home state to make this purely political speech should be charged by the taxpayers? Do you think when a senator makes political broadcasts or political television broadcasts, radio or television, that the expense of these broadcasts should be charged by the taxpayers? Well, I know what your answer is. It's the same answer that the audience gives me whenever I discuss this particular problem. The answer is no. The taxpayer shouldn't be required to finance actions which are not official business, but which are primarily political business. Well then, the question arises, you say, well, how do you pay for these? And how can you do it illegally? And there are several ways that it can be done. The first way is that you're a rich man. I don't happen to be a rich man, so I couldn't use that one. Another way that is used is to put your wife on the payroll. Let me say incidentally that my opponent, my opposite number for the vice presidency on the Democratic ticket, does have his wife on the payroll and has had her on his payroll for 10 years. For the past 10 years. Now just let me say this. That's his business, and I'm not critical of him for doing that. You will have to pass judgment on that particular point. But I have never done that for his reason. I have found that there are so many deserving stenographics and secretaries in Washington that needed the work that I just didn't feel right to put my wife on the payroll. My wife's sitting over there. She's a wonderful stenographer, and she used to teach stenography, and she used to teach shorthand in school. That was when I met her. And I can tell you folks that she's worked many hours at night and many hours on Saturdays and Sundays in my office, and she's done a fine job. And I'm proud to say that tonight, that in the 6 years that I've been in the House and the Senate of the United States, Pat Nixon has never been on the government payroll. What are other ways that these finances can be taken care of? Some who are lawyers, and I happen to be a lawyer, continue to practice law, but I haven't been able to do that. I'm so far away from California that I've been so busy with my senatorial work that I have not engaged in any legal practice. And also, as far as law practice is concerned, it seemed to me that the relationship between an attorney and a client was so personal that you couldn't possibly represent the man as an attorney and then have an unbiased view when he presented his case to you in the event that he had won before government. And so I felt that the best way to handle these necessary political expenses of getting my message to the American people and the speeches I made, the speeches that I printed for most past, concerned this one message of exposing this administration, the communism, the corruption of it. The only way that I could do that was to accept the communism and the aid which people in my home state of California who contributed in my campaign and who continue to make these contributions after I was elected was glad to make. And let me say that I'm proud of the fact that not one of them has ever asked me for a special favor. I'm proud of the fact that not one of them has ever asked me to be voted on a bill other than of my conscience could dictate. And I am proud that of the fact that the taxpayers, by subterfuge or otherwise, have paid 1 dime for expenses which I thought were political and should be charged to the taxpayers. Let me incidentally tell you that some of you may say, well, that's all right, Senator. That's your explanation, but have you got any proof? And I'd like to tell you this evening that just an hour ago, we received an independent audit of this entire fund. I suggested to Governor Sherman Adams, who is the chief of staff of Dwight Eisenhower campaign, that an independent audit and legal report be obtained, that I have the audit here in my hands. It's an audit made up of the Pricewaterhouse Company firm, and a legal opinion by Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher lawyers in Los Angeles, the biggest law firm, and incidentally, one of the best ones in Los Angeles. I'm proud to be able to report to you tonight that this audit and this legal opinion is being forwarded to General Eisenhower. And I'd like to read to you the opinion that was prepared by Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, and based on all department laws and statutes, together with the audit report prepared by the certified public accountants. Quote, "It is our conclusion that Senator Nixon did not obtain any financial gain from the collection and disbursement of the fund by Dana Smith. That Senator Nixon did not violate any federal or state law by reason of the operation of the fund, and that neither the portion of the fund paid by Dana Smith directly to the said persons, nor the portion paid to Senator Nixon to reimburse him for designated office expenses constituted income to the senator, which was either reportable or taxable as income under applicable law taxes. Signed, Gibbon, Dunn, and Crutcher by Elmo H. Coley." Now that, my friends, is not Nixon speaking, but that is an independent audit which was requested because I want the American people to know all the facts, and I am not afraid of having independent people go in and check the facts. And that is exactly what they did. But then I realized that there are still some who may say, and rightfully so, and let me say that, then I recognize that some will continue to smear it regardless of what the truth may be. But that there had been, understandably, some honest misunderstanding of the matter. And there are some that will say, well, maybe you were able to, Senator, to fake this thing. How can we believe what you say? After all, is there a possibility that you got some sums in cash? Is there a possibility that you may have feathered your own nest? And so now what I'm going to do, incidentally, that this is unprecedented in the history of American politics. I'm going to give you to this television and radio audience a complete financial history. Everything I have earned, everything I have spent, and everything I have owned. And I want you to know the facts. I'll have to start early. I was born in 1913. Our family was one of the modest circumstances, and most of my life was spent in a store out in East Wheeler. It was a grocery store, one of those family enterprises, and the only reason we were able to make it go was because my mother and dad had 5 boys, and we all worked in the store. I worked my way through college, and to a great extent, through law school. And then in 1940, probably the best thing that ever happened to me happened. I married Pat, who's sitting over there. We had a rather difficult time that when we were married, like so many young couples who may be listening to us, I practiced law. She continued to teach school. Then in 1942, I went into military service. Let me say that my service record was not an unusual one. I went to the South Pacific. I guess I'm entitled to a few military stars. I've got a couple of letters of commendation. But I was there when the bombs were falling. And then I returned. I returned to the United States in 1946. I ran for Congress. And when we came out of the war, Pat, during the war, had worked as a stenographer and in a bank and as an economist for the government bank and government agency. And when we came out, the total of our savings for that entire period was just less than a little of $10,000. Every cent of that, incidentally, was in government bonds. Well, that's where we start when I go into politics. Now what I've earned since then in politics, well, here it is. I've jotted it down. Let me read the notes. First of all, I had a salary as a congressman as well as a senator. Second, I have received a total in the past 6 years of $1,600 from estates, which were in my law firm at the time that I severed from my connection with it. And incidentally, as I said before, I have not engaged in any legal practice and have not accepted any fees from businesses that came into the firm that I went into after politics. I have made an average of approximately $1,500 a year for non-political speaking engagements and lectures. And unfortunately, we've inherited a little money. Pat sold her interest in her father's estate for $3,000, and I inherited $1,500 from my grandpa. We lived rather modestly. For 4 years, we lived in an apartment in Park Fairfax and Alexandria, Virginia. The rent was $80 a month, and we stayed for the time that we could buy a house. Now that that we took in, what did we do with this money? What do we have today to show for it? So this will a little surprise for you, because it is so little, I suppose, as senators generally go out of people for public life. First of all, we've got a house in Washington, which cost $41,000, and on which we owe $27. We have a house in Whittier, California, which costs $13,000, and on which we owe $3,000. My folks are living there at the present time. I have just $4,000 in life insurance plus my GI policy, which I've never been able to convert and which will run out in 2 years. I have no life insurance whatever on Pat. I have no life insurance on our 2 youngsters, Tricia and Julie. I own a 1950 Oldsmobile car. We have our furniture. We have no stocks and bonds of any type. We have no interest of any kind, direct or indirect, in any business. None of what we have. What do we owe? Well, in addition to our mortgage, the $20,000 mortgage on the house in Washington, the $10,000 one on the house in Whittier, I owe $4,500 to the Riggs Bank in Washington, D.C., and the interest 4.5%. I owe $3,500 to my parents and the interest on the loan, which I pay regularly because it's the part of the savings that makes through the year that we work hard for. I pay regularly a 4% interest. And then I have a $500 loan, which I have for my life insurance. Well, that's about it. That's what we have. And that's what we owe. It isn't very much, but Pat and I have satisfaction of every dime that we've got that's honestly ours. And I should say this, that Pat doesn't have a mink coat, but she does have a respectable Republican cloth coat. And I always tell her that she'd look good at anything. One other thing I probably should tell you, because I don't think that they'll probably be saying this about me, we did get something a gift after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our 2 youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trip, we got a message from the Union Station in Baltimore. They said that they had a package for us. we went down to get it. And you know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he'd sent all the way from Texas, black and white spotted. And our little girl, Tricia, 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know the kids, like all kids, love dogs. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're gonna keep it. It isn't easy to become a nationwide audience and bear your life as I have done. But I want to say something before I conclude that I think most of you will agree on. Mr. Mitchell, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, made the statement that if a man couldn't afford the United States Senate, he shouldn't run for the Senate. And I just want to make my position clear. I don't agree with Mr. Mitchell when he says that only a rich man should serve his government in the United States Senate or in Congress. I don't believe that represents the thinking of the Democratic Party, or especially the Republican one. I believe that it's fine that a man like Governor Stevenson, who inherited his fortune from his father, can run for president. But I also feel that it's essential in this country of ours, as a man of modest means can also run for president. Because, remember Abraham Lincoln? You remember what he said? God must have loved the common people. He made so many of them. And now I'm going to suggest some courses of conduct. First of all, you have read in the papers about our funds now. Mr. Stevenson apparently had a couple. One of them in which a group of business people paid and helped to supplement the salaries of the Senate employees. Here's where the money went directly into our pockets. And I think that what Mr. Stevenson should be to come before the American people, as I have, give the names of the people that contributed to the fund, give the names of the people who put this money into their pockets at the same time that they were receiving money from the state government, and see what favors, if any, they gave out for that. I don't condemn Mr. Stevenson for what he did, but until the facts are in, there is a doubt that they will be raised. And as far as Mr. Sparkman is concerned, I would suggest the same thing. He's had his wife on the payroll. I don't condemn him for that, but I think that he should come before the American people and indicate what outside sources of income he had. I would suggest that under the circumstances, both Mr. Sparkman and Mr. Stevenson should come before the American people, as I have, and make a complete financial statement to their financial history. And if they don't, it will be an admission that they have something to hide. And I think that you will agree to me. Because, folks, remember, a man that's to be President of the United States, a man that's to be Vice President of the United States, must have confidence of all people. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. And that's why I suggest that Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Sparkman, since they are under attack, should do what they are doing. Now let me say this. I know that this is not the last of the smears. In spite of my explanation tonight, other smears will have to be made. Others have been made in the past. And the purpose of the smears, I know, is this. To silence me. To make me lit up. Well, they just don't know who they're dealing with. I'm going to tell you this. I remember the dark days of the Hiss case. Some of the same columnists, some of the same radio commentators who are attacking me now and misrepresenting my opinion. Were violently opposing me at the time I was after Alger Hiss. But I continued to fight because I knew I was right. And I can say to this great television and radio audience that I have no apologies to the American people for my part in putting Alder Hiss where he is now today. And as far as I'm concerned, I intend to continue to fight. Why do I feel so deeply? Why do I feel that in spite of the smears, this misunderstanding, the necessity for a man to come up here and bare his soul as I have was necessary for me to continue this fight? And I want to tell you why. Because you see, I love my country. And I see my country as in danger. And I say that the only man that can save America at this time is the man that's running for president. On my ticket, Dwight Eisenhower. You say, why do I think it is danger? And I say, look at the record. 7 years of the Truman-Atchison administration, and what happened? 600 million people lost to the communists. And the administration, what's happening? And a war in Korea where we have lost 117,000 American casualties. And I say to all of you that a policy that the loss of those 600 million people to the communists and a war which cost us 117,000 American casualties isn't good enough for America. And I say that those in the State Department that made the mistakes which caused the war and which resulted in these losses should be kicked out of the State Department just as fast as we get them out of there. And let me say that I know Mr. Stevenson won't do that because he defends the Truman policy. And I know that Dwight Eisenhower will do that. And that he will give America the leadership that it needs. Take the problem of corruption. You've read about the mess in Washington. Mr. Stevenson can't clean it up because he was picked by the man Truman, under whose administration the mess was made. You wouldn't trust the man who made the mess to clean it up. That's Truman. And by the same token, you can't trust the man who was picked by the man that made the mess to clean it up. And that's Stevenson. And so I say Eisenhower, who owed nothing to Truman, nothing to the big city bosses. He is the man that can clean up the mess in Washington. Take communism. I say that as far as the subject is concerned, the danger is great to America. In his case, that they got the secrets which enabled them to break the American State Department code. They got secrets in the atomic bomb case, which enabled them to get the secret of their atomic bomb 5 years before they have gotten it from their own devices. And I say that any man who called them out his cause a red herring isn't fit enough to be president of the United States. I say that a man who, like Mr. Stevenson, has poo-pooed and ridiculed the communist threats in the United States. He said they are phantoms among ourselves. He has accused us that have attempted to expose the communists of looking for communists in the Bureau of Fisheries and Wildlife. I say that a man who says that isn't qualified to be the president of the United States, and I say that the only man who can lead us in this fight to rid the government of Eisenhower, because Eisenhower, you can be sure, recognizes the problem. And he knows how to deal with it. Now let me, finally, this evening, I want to read to you, just briefly, excerpts from a letter which I received. A letter which, after all this is over, no one can take away from us. It reads as follows. Dear Senator Nixon, since I'm only 19 years of age, I can't vote in this presidential election. But because me, if I could, you and General Eisenhower would certainly get my vote. My husband is in the Fleet Marines in Korea. He's a corpsman on the front lines, and we have a 2-month-old son he's never seen. And I feel confident that with great Americans like you and General Eisenhower in the White House, lonely Americans like myself will be united with their loved ones now in Korea. I only pray to God that you won't be too late. Enclosed in a small check to help you in your campaign, living on $85 a month, it is all I can afford at present. But let me know what else I can do. Folks, it's a check for $10. and it's one that I will never cash. And just let me say this. We hear a lot about the prosperity of these days. But I say, why can't we have prosperity built on peace rather than prosperity built on war? Why can't we have prosperity and an honest government in Washington, D.C. at the same time? Believe me, we can. And Eisenhower is the man that can lead this crusade to bring us that kind of prosperity. And now finally, I know that you wonder whether or not I'm going to stay on the Republican ticket or resign. Let me say this. I don't believe that I ought to quit because I'm not a quitter. And incidentally, Pat's not a quitter. After all, her name was Patricia Ryan and she was born on St. Patrick's Day. And you know, the Irish never quit. But the decision, my friends, is not mine. I would do nothing to harm the possibilities of Dwight Eisenhower to become President of the United States of America. For that reason, I'm submitting to the Republican National Committee tonight, through this television broadcast, the decision which it is theirs to make. Let them decide whether my position on the ticket will help or hurt. And I'm going to ask you to help them decide. Whether I write the Republican National Committee, whether you think I should stay on it or whether I should resign. And whatever decision, I will abide by it. But just let me say this one last word. Regardless of what happens, I'm going to continue this fight. I'm going to campaign up and down and America until we drive the crooks and the communists and those that defend them out of Washington. And remember, folks, Eisenhower is a great man. He's a great man. And a vote for Eisenhower is a vote for what's good for America. And what's good for America. Thank you.